with it.
You can ask it in English, isn't it?
I mean, that's okay. If you want me to translate it, I'll do that. If you want to repeat your question.
Because most of them, they're not Arabic tongue.
That's okay. Sure. Go ahead, dear. Go ahead. Ask your question.
You want me to ask it?
Sure.
Okay. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم هل كان يجلس لحلقات العلم مع الصحابة مثل ما نحن بنجلس بأيامنا لما بنعطي مثلا حلقات وعظ أو درسية، أم كان ينتظر إنه عندما تنزل عليه آية فيها أحكام فقهية حتى يوضحها يفصلها للصحابة؟ يعني ما هي طريقة لقائه بالصحابة؟
All right. So the sister is asking a question. When the Prophet ﷺ was preaching, was he necessarily doing something like of what we would do today, a halaqa or a gathering, or something like giving a lecture, or was it a question would be asked and then he would answer it like a spontaneous answer, or how did it really happen? So there were different types of how we got this information. There were times when the Prophet ﷺ would literally sit with the Sahaba in a circle, just like when we would say in Hadith Jibreel alayhi salam, that the Prophet ﷺ was sitting with the Sahaba literally in a type of a circle. And I want you to look at this. When you say circle, I want you to look at this because it's like a U shape. They would literally say a halaqa. The word halaqa or a circle would give us an idea that everybody was capable of seeing everybody. And that's the importance of sitting in a U shape. Everybody is capable of seeing everybody, and we're not sitting covering each other's backs, but or covering each other's faces, or without us realizing we can't see each other. But no, they would be sitting in a way where everybody can see everybody's face to create a better communication. There were times, just like in Hadith Jibril, بينما نحن جلوس عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذ طلع علينا رجل شديد بياض الثياب شديد سواد الشعر لا يرى عليه أثر السفر ولا يعرفه منا أحد حتى جلس إلى النبي. So we could see that in this hadith that there was literally a session. There were numerous hadith that even provoked the women and said, well, make us a day just like the men have a day. So why can't we also have something that we could, ask questions, learn, or probably, engage as a personal engagement, just as the men. So the Prophet ﷺ told them, well, that is possible. We could do that. Okay. Now, the other method is that there were times when a question would be asked and an ayah would be revealed, or the Prophet ﷺ would answer. Okay, an ayah would be revealed when a question, يسألونك عن المحيض قل هو أذى فاعتزلوا النساء في المحيض. They ask you about the menstruation and tell them that's an ayah revealed. But there are other times when it wasn't an ayah revealed, but it was the Prophet ﷺ himself actually explaining the situation, just like Fatima bint Qais, when she came to the Prophet ﷺ and told the Prophet ﷺ that her husband Thabit ibn Qais, that لا أنكر عليه لا في خلق ولا في دين. The Prophet ﷺ was told, well, at least she told him, that she does not object to her husband Thabit not in his religiosity or even in his deen. So that's when the Prophet ﷺ would basically tell her, would you return his own garden to him, which is the mahar that he had paid. In another incident, for example, the Prophet ﷺ, in fact, it was more than one, but in another example that I can think of right now, a woman comes to the Prophet ﷺ and she says, my father got me married to his own nephew, لِيَرْفَعَ بِي خَسِيسَتَهُ, in order to alleviate his nephews, whether lack of masculinity or not necessarily having this chivalry, etc. But at the end of the day, is that the Prophet ﷺ needed on the spot to ask for the man who's actually her wali, her own father, and then investigate the case. Right on the spot. He solved it on his own. In another situation, the Prophet ﷺ, three men come to the homes of the Prophet ﷺ, and they would ask about the Prophet ﷺ's ibadah. كأنهم تقالوها. And the hadith says, جاء ثلاث رهط إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. And what were they doing? Well, إلى بيت الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم. And they were asking about his ibadah. Then the Prophet ﷺ, well, the first one said, I pray and I don't sleep. And the second one, I fast and I don't break my fast. And the third one, I don't get married to women. In other words, choose celibacy as my way of spirituality, as my way of discipline, as my way of religiosity, etc. And the Prophet ﷺ explains to them, whoever is following the sunnah, then those are the ones that are following basically my path. And whoever man taraka sunnati falaysa minni, whoever leaves my sunnah, leaves my path, leaves my way, then they're not part of me. So you could see that there were instances at times, and at other times the Prophet ﷺ was literally teaching them, just like, for example, when we speak about the farewell Hajj. Hajjat al-Wada', the Prophet ﷺ, Hajjat al-Wada', he was giving a khutbah, and in the khutbah, this is what he said. In a khutbah, he was talking to them about what Tamim al-Dari. Tamim al-Dari comes, he was from Palestine. He comes to say his story. He comes to say what he had encountered about al-Jassasa, and the Prophet ﷺ basically gathers the people and tells them, here's Tamim al-Dari. Can you tell him what you just told me again? So here it is. Tamim al-Dari is repeating what he told the Prophet ﷺ about him seeing this strange creature out there, and that he had a conversation basically with this strange creature and all of these different things. The Prophet ﷺ said, can you tell them what you had told me? And then the Prophet ﷺ would then explain to them about some of the signs of Judgment Day. So there were some instances where a revelation happened without necessarily a question. And just like Surah Al-An'am, we do have different hadith that said that there was an instance that happened, but we had seen that we didn't really have an authentic narration that said what exactly was the instant. But in the end is that we do have certain times that the Prophet ﷺ would teach in without necessarily having a particular incident, and other times there would be a particular incident, and that's why you would have some Sahaba might have known a piece of information that other Sahaba did not know. Just like when we're talking about inheritance, there was this time where there was a dispute about a widowed woman's inheritance and what she really gets, or any inheritance even for the grandmother and all of that. And Umar ibn al-Khattab didn't know about some of that information. It isn't until someone else told him about the information. He said, oh, Umar was too busy in the market. Okay, so you could see that there were instances that even the top Sahaba did not necessarily have any information about, but other Sahaba probably had other information. We did last time in regards to Abdullah ibn Umar. We saw in Sahih, sorry, not in Sahih, but we saw that I believe it was right there that Ibn Umar basically did not know a piece of information, and then he said, well, if the Prophet ﷺ had said that, then that's all. No one is going to basically use any information beyond the information that the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned. And I think we got it right there. Hold on, let me see where that is when we had seen it last time. Here we go. Su'ila anhu ibn Umar. When he was asked about the porcupines, and then he said, well, this is the ayah that we know in regard to that one. And then they said, well, we had heard Abu Hurairah say that the Prophet ﷺ was asked about it, and he said, khabithatun min al-khaba'ith. In other words, it's an impure out of all the impurities. In other words, it's part of it. And Ibn Umar responds, in kana qala Rasulullah sallam hadha fahuwa kama qala. If the Prophet ﷺ had said that, then it is as he had said. In other words, it's basically going to be the final reference. It's going to be the final conclusion. in regards to this conversation, in my words, I are not going to be the center / the reference that you would basically use if we have a note that the Prophet ﷺ had said something. So he could see Abu Huraira had known something, even though just a note. Abu Huraira actually became Muslim in the 7th year Hijrah. So that's way after Ibn Umar. Way after Ibn Umar. Okay. And you're talking about Abu Huraira, becoming Muslim later, but being one of the most important narrators. SubhanAllah, each and every single one. He even narrated a hadith more than Abu Bakr as-Siddiq himself, even though Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was the one that was with the Prophet ﷺ. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was the one that he was his friend even before Islam. So definitely, if you were to look at Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, there's no one that's going to be comparable to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq to really know the Prophet ﷺ at close relations as much as Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, not even Umar, not even Ali, because he was already too young. You're talking about somebody that was close to the Prophet ﷺ's age. He was his best friend since childhood, since teenagehood, the least to make. All right. So there's definitely a lot of information that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq can tell you about the Prophet ﷺ that no one else knows. Right. He was there in every single corner. But to answer the question, like I said, there sometimes are halaqas, sometimes there are incidents where they happened and the Prophet ﷺ basically explained it to them. And there were times when it was an ayah revealed, and other times some Sahaba might have seen a response that other Sahaba did not get to see that response or were not present, and which is why it's important to recognize that the fuqaha, just like Shafi'i, for example, he recognized that not all the Sahaba necessarily in probably Mecca or probably Medina or in Baghdad or whatever, those Sahaba that went into those areas, that's not necessarily everything about Islam. Because Abdullah ibn Mas'ud might know one thing, that Amr ibn al-As in Egypt had known something, and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud did not know. And perhaps Abdullah ibn Umar knew something that perhaps maybe, let's say, Mu'adh ibn Jabal knew or did not know, or Talha didn't know, or that or this Sahabi. So at the end of the day, is that recognizing that is one key reason why one of the factors, at least one of the key factors, why we also have differences of opinions. So we can have the differences of opinions between scholars also resulted due to one Sahabi knowing a piece of information that another Sahabi might not have known. They could have been on the other side of the town, and this Sahabi was with the Prophet ﷺ. So this Sahabi will say, well, this is what happened. This is when we were told. For example, I'll give you Abdullah ibn Abbas regarded that mut'a marriage is permissible. Okay, mut'a marriage, the mut'a, the temporary marriage, he regarded that it was permissible. Okay, Ali ibn Abi Talib was the one that narrated the hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, that the last thing that happened, which is, in fact, he gave an exact timing when that was during the time of Khaybar, that the Prophet ﷺ had forbidden mut'a marriage, and he said that was basically forbidden till Judgment Day. Okay. Abdullah ibn Abbas, being a teenager, or in fact a preteen, Ali ibn Abi Talib was in his late 20s. All right. So certainly, if you are in your late 20s, the issue of women, marriage, family issues, those are going to be your concerns. You're going to really be, I guess, at least aware of that information. But somebody that is a preteen, like Abdullah ibn Abbas, who was only approximately 9 or 8 or probably 10 or 11 years old. So within that age group, you're not going to have the same type of information. Yes, the Prophet ﷺ made the dua for Abdullah ibn Abbas, Allahumma faqihu fi din wa alimhu ta'wil. Absolutely. But why would Abdullah ibn Abbas say one thing and Ali ibn Abi Talib say one thing? Because what would interest somebody in their late 20s and the matters that would interest them was completely different than a preteen and what would interest them and what information they would get. Same thing if you're to talk about Anas ibn Malik. He was just a young child. You cannot compare Anas ibn Malik, for example, with perhaps Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, who was way older than that. Okay, that's why Abdullah ibn Mas'ud got so angry when Abu Bakr as-Siddiq appointed Zayd ibn Thabit. He said, why would you appoint Zayd ibn Thabit when he was already, that's what he literally said. He said, why would you appoint Zayd ibn Thabit to be the one to write and collect the Quran when I was present during wahy in each and every single stage? Because you want to remember Ibn Abd, which is Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he actually became Muslim. He was the 6th to become Muslim.
Right.
The 6th to become Muslim. Just imagine that when you say the 6th person to become Muslim, no one else. It was basically the Prophet ﷺ, it was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, it was Khadija, it was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, it was Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, or, Abdullah Mas'ud, he was the 6th to become Muslim. You can compare that with Zayd ibn Thabit, and that's why he got so angry, and he said, when I was already a grown man, Zayd ibn Thabit was a sperm in a kafir's back. That's what he said. In a kafir's back. It's like, what are you doing here? He definitely was not happy about Abu Bakr as-Siddiq's selection. But Abu Bakr as-Siddiq knew that this required a lot of effort. This required a lot of physical capacity as well. It's not just an issue of information, but it also is an issue of the ability to handle such a responsibility. And just understanding that, you could see that, yes, some information some Sahaba had known about and other Sahaba did not know. And that's why it's important to recognize after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba knew that they had to carry the mission. They had to carry the Prophet ﷺ's teachings, the information, everything, the legacy. So you had some go to perhaps east and others go west, and they were doing their jihad, whatever it takes to become the one to carry on the legacy, to carry on the mission. So you had some Sahaba that knew some information. They went all the way to Egypt. Just like you look at Amr ibn al-As, Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh, who went to Sudan, who he then went to Libya, then went to Algeria, and then joined with Uqba ibn Nafi', and then fought against the Romans there. So you could see one went all the way there. And then you had other Sahaba that basically, just like Salama, who actually died in Cyprus. And you had other Sahaba that died at the walls of China. So you're looking at some going all the way west, others going all the way east to the walls of China. Imagine that.
And then Turkey, Abu Ayyub al-Ansari and his
Abu Ayyub al-Ansari went all the way to Turkey, right there. Bury me at the walls of that fortress right there. So you see all that way. You see some Sahaba that went all the way to Afghanistan, borders of China, and some actually had to go all the way on the other side. Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh, he was the key figure to actually bring Islam to Sudan and Northern Africa, Algeria and Mauritania and all Senegal and all of those areas. Just imagine. So Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh, just an idea about Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh. Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh al-Amiri, His story is quite interesting. Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh became Muslim, migrated to Medina, and he was writing the Quran. Okay, it was like taking the role of Katabat al-Wahy. In Surah Al-Mu'minun, when it was revealed, then it said, after reciting all those ayat in Surah Al-Rum, and then it said, Fatabarakallah ahsanul khaliqeen, and he had said, Fatabarakallah ahsanul khaliqeen. Then it occurred to him that if I can create what a good conclusion would be, then I can create my own Quran too. Guess what happened? He left Islam. Not only that, but went back to Mecca and started warmongering against the Prophet ﷺ.
Yeah.
Warmongering. When 8th year Hijrah happened and the Prophet ﷺ conquered Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ ordered for the assassination of Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh. But Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh was the milk brother for Uthman bin Affan. So he goes to Uthman bin Affan and basically seeks that he would intercede and get involved somehow to give him at least, protection, anything of that sort. So the Prophet accepted Uthman bin Affan's intercession. And it isn't until one day Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh, along with other chieftains of Quraysh, they're looking at Bilal ibn Rabah go up mountaining al-Kaaba to make the adhan, and here they are. You're talking about Hakim ibn Khuzam, you're talking about Abu Sufyan, hey, these big guys, these chieftains right now, seeing, yes, Abu Sufyan at the time became Muslim, but, still, mu'allaf qulubihim or mu'allaf qulubuhum. And then right there, one of them said, well, good thing my father was not there to see this shame of a slave mountaining what we regarded as the most important sanctuary right there. But then Abu Sufyan said, well, I'm not going to say anything, or the other one, basically, I'm not going to say anything because I'm afraid that the stones will tell Muhammad ﷺ about what we're saying, and we'll get in trouble, that is. So that's when the Prophet ﷺ approached them and said, this is what you said, this is what you said. And that's when they knew, well, there was no way that this information could have leaked, because we're the only ones standing here and away from everybody. And that's on the spot what led them to making their shahada, making them do their shahada. And it isn't until later that Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh would basically always, when the Prophet ﷺ would talk to him or he would encounter the Prophet ﷺ, remember they're in the same city in Mecca, and then Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh would be so shy to look at the Prophet ﷺ's face. And he explained to Uthman bin Affan, please tell him that I'm just shy to look at his face for what I had done. I was a Muslim, then I left Islam, and then here I am, I'm back in it again, and I'm so ashamed for all the warmongering that I had done. And that's when the Prophet ﷺ just gives a smile and says, Al-Islam yajubu ma qabla. Islam wipes away all those past sins. Now, having that being said, you could see Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh, well, not only was he a Muslim, but later the Prophet ﷺ actually gave him the position to be similar to what we would consider a mayor. He was like the mayor or the chieftain or the deputy for the Prophet ﷺ over Mecca, because the Prophet ﷺ didn't stay in Mecca. He stayed in Medina. He stayed in Medina. So he assigns him to actually be the chieftain. Is it until later that Sahih ibn Amr then is given this, because Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh actually went on a mission to do jihad all the way Sudan, and then from Sudan, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and all those northern areas with Uqba ibn Nafi'. Because Uqba ibn Nafi', is actually the cousin for Amr ibn al-As. Amr ibn al-As was in Fustat in Egypt. So they all worked as a team together to carry the Prophet ﷺ's legacy / the information that the Prophet ﷺ was teaching.
Okay, so we can say that in the Prophet ﷺ hasn't a calendar, specific day to meet the Sahaba, same day used to do that in
No, there is a same day. No, there is a same day.
It's the only chance in Dar al-Arqam to meet together, like after Asr, before
so there wasn't necessarily in the beginning of, at least when they went to Medina. All right, the Prophet ﷺ did say stay at Kulthum ibn al-Hadam's home, and then Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. Kulthum ibn al-Hadam, he was basically, consider him like his own home. It was this big place that was considered kind of like the hostel, that like a hotel, like a, that the Sahaba that were migrating from Mecca to Medina, they would stay at Kulthum ibn al-Hadam's home, and he was inviting them over. But then the Prophet ﷺ was then later on stayed at Abu Ayyub al-Ansari's home, and then, of course, building al-Masjid al-Nabawi, that became this area that they would gather in. And then the gathering can happen after Salah, can happen after perhaps maybe a certain time, Salat al-Jumu'ah, and that would be that type of gathering. Sometimes it can be a gathering where this is exclusive to teaching at the masjid, basically. And that's what inspired later the Muslims, that the universities really started out from the masjid.
Right.
The whole idea of university as being a place to educate, a place to organize, a place to govern, a place to, communicate, teach, and all of these different things. It was considered like the community center, the city hall, and the government center as well. That was the masjid.
So from there, it comes Jamia from Jami'.
Well, Jamia actually means a place where people are united or people are combined in. All right, so that's where all that. There was also Masjid Namira, but you can't compare it with the amount of time that the Prophet ﷺ spent in Masjid al-Nabawi, because it was it was, in fact, the Prophet ﷺ's door was right in front of the masjid.
Right.
So that was something that he just needed to get out, make wudu, get out. And it was something, in fact, to say Aisha was capable of even seeing from her own window who was coming into the masjid.
Right.
All right. So whether there was a gathering already made there, or whether there were times when they would agree that, hey, today we're making a gathering. Was it necessarily on a Sunday or Tuesday or anything of that sort? Not necessarily, but they would, assign a day. Hey, today we're doing this. We're going to be meeting on this. We're going to be, or that there's, just like when we speak about certain hadith that would really indicate that there was at least 10 or 12 or 13 Sahaba, just like in the ayah that I can remember right now, when when that ayah was revealed, the Prophet ﷺ was sitting with the Sahaba, and then this ayah was revealed, and then another Sahabi, I forgot who he was, but he goes all the way to Ubay and goes to him and just tells him that, listen, this ayah was revealed. And remember, when they spent 50 days where no Sahabi was allowed to talk to them, they were completely banned, completely boycotted, to the point that Ubay ibn Ka'b, receives a special note from the king of the Byzantine Empire, And what was the king of the Byzantine Empire saying? He was like, I heard about your friend and what he had done to you. He's boycotting you. Why don't you just join us? And what we will do, we'll basically assign you to be like in a high-ranking position in the government, maybe an advisor, something important, and certainly that comes with a lot of money privileges. When you are looking at a social status, that actually means a financial status, that means a dunya status. And that's when Ubay ibn Ka'b, that was the only guy that came over to talk to him. And it was a deputy coming in with this note, coming from all the way to the Roman Empire, from the Roman Empire coming to Ubay ibn Ka'b and said, hey, listen, I've got a special note for you. He reads that note because Ubay ibn Ka'b was also one of Kutab al-Wahi, so he definitely knew how to write and read. He reads it and then burns it right away. And he said, listen, if I see you around, you're not going to be alive. You're going to tell him, don't even think about it. Even if the Prophet ﷺ, even if all the Sahaba, even if I was banned, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to seek that forgiveness. That's not necessarily what he had said, but that was lisanul hal. Okay. And when Ubay ibn Ka'b, he basically was informed about this, and that's when he comes in, and the only one that stood up when Ubay ibn Ka'b comes into the gathering where the Prophet ﷺ was in reciting this ayah, Talha ibn Ubaidillah was the only one. And mind you, Talha ibn Ubaidillah, his left arm was disabled because during the Battle of Uhud, he got a strike from a kafir right on his left arm, and his left arm was basically completely paralyzed. But Ubay ibn Ka'b comes in, Talha ibn Zubayr stands up and gets up and goes to the door, just embracing and hugging him and congratulating him for the news that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had forgiven him. Okay, so you could see that, and Ubay ibn Ka'b, he remembered that forever, and he said, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it when he was the only one to stand up to congratulate me for this. And he said, I'll never forget it. And they were all gathered, and he knew that there were, and he was mentioning that there were a large number of Sahaba. They were hearing this. They were sitting down. They were hearing this, but the only one that got up was really Talha. Okay, so you could see that the hadith would tell us a lot about the circumstances, the situations, and what really their life, when the Sahaba's life was like, and when they got this information, how the information was delivered. So it wasn't necessarily one incident. It wasn't necessarily one person always hearing. Sometimes it's a number of different Sahaba, just like hadith Jibreel, when he said, وَلَا يَعْرِفُهُ مِنَّا أَحَدٍ. What does that mean? None of us had minna. In other words, there was a large number. They were sitting down in a large number. It was a large crowd, and we were all astonished. We were all astonished. This person comes in to ask questions, and then he said, فَعَجِبْنَا لَهُ. He said with a na. We were all surprised. Why would he ask a question and at the same time, confirm the answer? Unless you're a teacher. Only a teacher would do that, to ask you a question and confirm that you gave the right answer. Only a teacher would do that. It isn't until later that the Prophet ﷺ explains to him that was actually Jibreel alayhi salam. So I hope I answered that one, dear.
Yeah, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. What I learned from it, that the Prophet ﷺ has no specific day, time, and the week to gather with the Sahaba. Same our days, you see. And when they, I don't know if they have right to interrupt him or ask him during his speech or priest.
Fair enough. Did they interrupt or ask questions?
Yeah.
The Sahaba, when the ayah was revealed, لا تسألوا عن أشياء تبد لكم تسؤكم. When did that happen? So the Prophet ﷺ said, ask. one Sahabi stands up, and when the Prophet ﷺ, in one incident, he said, سبعون ألفا يدخلون الجنة بغير حساب ولا سابقة عذاب. 70,000 will enter Jannah without prior, accountability and without any punishment. 70,000. So that's when Ukasha stands up and he says, Ukasha ibn Mihsan, he basically stands up and he says, "O Prophet of Allah, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I would be one of them." The Prophet ﷺ tells him, "You are one of them." Another Sahabi stands up and he says, "Me too." Ukasha beat you to it. Sabaqaka biha Ukasha. Now, then in another similar incident, the Prophet ﷺ, the large crowd, the Prophet ﷺ is basically saying, ask, this is your time to ask any question. Ironically, one Sahabi stands up and says, "Who's my father?" And he says, "Your father is," and tells him the name. Did he say the right name? Or at least not necessarily the right name, but did he say the name that he had known to being his father? In other words, the name that he had already thought that was his father? Yes. But his mother got so furious at him, and she said, "Why would you do such a thing to perhaps, you never know, your mother could have done a mistake, and why would you expose that mistake right in front of everyone? I could have done a mistake. So why would you basically stand up and ask such a question? And what if he gave you a different answer than the answer that you had known? You had then created a whole calamity. You had then distorted my image. You had then right there put me in big trouble." So this is when this ayah, لا تسألوا عن أشياء تبدى لكم تسؤكم, was revealed. Do not ask about things that if it were to be revealed, it would have created harm, would have basically harmed you. So the Sahaba avoided asking too many questions because the Prophet ﷺ was teaching them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had instructed certain things, and سكت عن أشياء غير نسيان. He was quiet about other things, and not necessarily because he had forgotten to talk about it, but because it is an indication that it was dismissed as basically permissible. So don't bring it up. لا تسألوا عن أشياء تبدى لكم تسؤكم. That's one side. And the other side, that the Prophet ﷺ was telling them and teaching them, don't ask about it, don't bring it up. So the Sahaba, they did not want to ask questions because they didn't want to be the ones to perhaps provoke a revelation that might make something haram. They didn't want to do that. So whenever an Arabi would come, that's when everybody, or at least a large number of Sahaba, who's an Arabi? An Arabi is a Bedouin. Just an idea about Bedouins. Bedouins, they live away from the city, very isolated, nomads, deal with animals. And when you deal with animals, you start without you realizing, contracting some of their akhlaq, without you realizing. And that's why no matter where you go, when you deal with the country people, it's completely different when you're dealing with city people. Country people are going to be rough. Country people are going to be sometimes abrupt. Country people get too nosy sometimes out of curiosity. You go to the country and they'll ask you, so how much money do you make? Where do you live? So how many kids do you have? Are you married? All these different questions that in the city, we would regard that as private. And this isn't a question that you would be asking because this is a private question. So same thing, if you were to talk about 100 people, imagine somebody that is living even beyond the country and living all the way away from any other group of people but their own group of people, probably mother, father, children, and a couple aunts and a couple uncles, and that's it. That was their nomadic life. Anyhow, so a lot of these Bedouins, they would come in, hear about Islam, come in, and just like that man that came in and literally urinated in the masjid, literally just goes into the masjid, gets the urge. Of course, here's land, here's soil, but just goes behind a pillar, basically, and decides, this is the right place to basically, hey, call of nature. Do it right there. And that's when the Sahaba, city people, they get up trying to stop him. But then the Prophet ﷺ said, دعوه وادنوا عليه ذنوبا من الماء. Let him finish, get a bucket of water, spill it over it, and that's the end of it. But this man, he saw all of this, and he just said, oh Allah, let me and Muhammad enter Jannah, and don't let any other one or any of them enter with us. In other words, you know what? For that bad attitude that they gave me, that's his way of thinking about it. For that behavior, for that way of how they were going to, startle me, you know what? Don't want them entering Jannah. Right? That's it. So the Prophet ﷺ tells him, لَقَدْ حَجَّرْتَ وَاسِعًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is way more expensive than that. That's it. Just for this mistake, that's it. Cancel them out from Jannah. Now, looking at that, you had different instances that Bedouins would come in to ask questions and various types of questions. And that's when the Sahaba would seize the moment. They would seize the moment whenever a Bedouin comes in, because they will not use any form of diplomatic questioning or any form of trying to somehow, speak in a way that is appropriate, but they will be, just as is. And that's when the Prophet ﷺ would still answer those people's questions. And the Prophet ﷺ would still deal with these cases. And the other Sahaba that were not Bedouins, of course, from the city, they would say, well, a man came to the Prophet ﷺ, and this is what he said. This is what he asked. This is what he responded. He corrected his way. He got up. He smiled. Just like, you see a Sahabi. He wasn't necessarily Bedouin, but he comes to the Prophet ﷺ. He said, I fell on my wife. Well, I mean, he didn't mean fell on my wife, but he tripped over her. No. He actually meant, well, it was Ramadan, and this man, he just said, I fell on my wife, but he really wanted to be just polite and just say, well, it actually went farther than that. Had a strong urge. We were intimate, and here I am. I know it's not right. I know it's haram, but I still did it. So the Prophet tells him, well, you're going to have to fast 60 days. I mean, you can see right now the urge was so strong that I couldn't handle even 30. You're going to make me do 60 days. That's going to be extremely hard on me. So that the Prophet tells him, well, make sadaqah. And he said, oh, wallahi ma bayna labatayha afqaru minna. Between these two mountains, there's no one that is even poorer than us. So that's when the Prophet just smiles, gives him some dates, and he says, you take this. In other words, I'll make the sadaqah on behalf of you. And you know what? You would be the one that would be qualified to even take the donation. What does that mean? Situations where people cannot handle it, then you could see that the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba would describe this, and they would say, well, here's what happened when these Bedouins would come in, and the Prophet ﷺ would explain either the answer or explain certain questions when that man comes in and he says, you know what? I'm a very simple person. Give me a simple answer. Who is God? And he said, well, were you ever on a ship? Yes, I was. Did it ever get into this type of like a hurricane, tornado, anything of that? He said, yes. He said, did you feel it shaking, all of that? Yes, I did. Did you feel that there was like this powerful being that could save you, something superior? He said, yes. He said, that's God. So now you could see that in simple terms. He's like, did you feel this? Yes. Did you go into the circumstance? Yes, I did. Okay. Well, that feeling that you got of something superior, something powerful, that is your fitrah letting you know of God. That's your God instinct. That's your God instinct. That's that feeling that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put within you, called al-fitrah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put within you. Okay, I hope I answered that question there. Did I answer it?
Yeah, Jazakallah khair.
Let's move on. Of course, we were supposed to do, what time is it? Okay, not too bad. Just 1 hour, not too bad. We were just trying to answer a question. Okay, let's see. So we were actually talking about the different rulings in regards to the different creatures that relate to this ayah. Let's see. We were doing oh no, not this one. This one. قُلْ لَا أَجِدُ فِيمَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ مُحَرَّمًا عَلَى طَاعِمٍ يَطْعَمُهُ إِلَّا أَن يَكُونَ مَيْتَةً أَوْ دَمًا مَسْفُوحًا. And we said that scholars debated whether this ayah was revealed during the time when the Prophet ﷺ was in Mecca, or whether this was Madani. So why is that important? Because that's going to be the main crux of a whole debate. Is this ayah basically exclusive to only these mentioned items being haram, as number one, the carry-ons, deceased animals, gushing blood, or pork? Are these the only items that are considered haram, making this ayah exclusive? Or is this ayah not necessarily exclusive, but would be including all the other items that were mentioned, whether in Quran or whether in Sunnah, and therefore all the other items would add on to what was uhiya? So then we said, okay, well, how do I understand, since it's saying, well, say I do not find anything from what was revealed onto me that is prohibited or impermissible to consume as food, unless it is one, the dead, the blood, gushing blood, or even the pork. So then they said, well, this was ma uhiya ilayh up till that date, which is when he was in Mecca. The second opinion basically said, well, it doesn't have to be up till that date, but this is actually talking about that anyways, what was revealed, there could be at other times that other things were revealed containing more items to be prohibited, since unanimously scholars agreed that drinking alcohol was revealed way after this, but no one at all would say that it is permissible to consume. Then they debated the different hadith in regards to different types of animals, and in particular, the carnivore animals. So then we went into different types of carnivore animals, then we went into different types of herbivore animals that may be living in the wild. And then we went into herbivore and carnivore birds. Are they, and which ones are permissible? So we looked at a number of different hadith. We looked at a number, and we talked about a number of different hadith, some of them weak, some of them authentic, etc. So now we're continuing with this whole debate and basically going over, I guess, different particular animals in order to discuss. So we talked about the elephants, we talked about jerboas, we talked about different birds, different kinds of birds, vultures, eagles, hawks, and all these different animals. We also talked about mice, we talked about snakes, all these different things. And we said, in general, the scholars that did not believe that there is an authentic hadith that says that anything that has claws or anything that has a carnivore tooth is necessarily haram, or they didn't regard those ahadith as sahiha. Those are the ones that ended giving giving the fatwa that things like carnivore animals, hyenas, perhaps maybe foxes, that they were halal. The majority of the scholars, they regarded that those ahadith are actually authentic, and that we have resources that back up in evidence to prove the authenticity of these resources and these ahadith, that carnivore animals or even carnivore birds, since they would basically have the claws, that they would also be considered as haram. Then we got to this statement right there, and we said, وَكَرِهَ النُّعْمَانُ وَأَصْحَابُهُ أَكْلَ الضَّبُعِ وَالثَّعْلَبِ. That Nu'man, basically, who's a Nu'man? Nu'man is basically Nu'man is basically Abu Hanifa. Nu'man is Abu Hanifa. So when he says كَرِهَ النُّعْمَانُ وَأَصْحَابُهُ, this is talking about Abu Hanifa and his friend. You might, he doesn't mean his friends, but the scholars that basically followed that madhab, they regarded it as makruh. Okay, when you say makruh, what does that mean? Makruh means that it is hated, not necessarily haram. In other words, you don't get sinned for, if we're going to talk about this animal, okay, as being makruh and not haram, you're not going to be at sin for consuming it because it's makruh, but you will be getting rewarded for avoiding it. If we say something is haram, you will be getting at sin for doing it, but you will be getting rewarded for leaving it. So for you to leave perhaps a lot of those haram things that might be out there, you're getting rewarded even though you didn't necessarily come across it. You're getting rewarded just by avoiding it. Okay, let's see. So when you say ashab al-Nu'man, what does that actually mean? Means all those different scholars that basically had followed the madhab Abu Hanifa al-Nu'man. So of course, when you look at madhab Abu Hanifa al-Nu'man and Nu'man ibn Thabit, and certainly you're talking about all those different scholars that were also contributing to that madhab. Okay, they actually considered that it was makruh to eat the hyenas and the foxes, right? Wait a minute, I thought these animals were carnivores. Yes, well, Shafi'i considered that those animals were permissible to eat. In fact, there was a narration, look at this one. He said, the ruwiyah, and this is called sigha tad'if. A sigha, a way to indicate that this is indicating that it was not necessarily authentic, but there was a note out there that Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, just a note, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas is one of those 10 promised Jannah, okay, that he used to eat hyenas. I mean, it would be so hard to actually hyenas. Okay, hyenas and vultures are pretty much the same idea, right? They would feed on the remains of animals and not necessarily hunt them, but they would hunt. Okay, let's see. Yet, for an Imam Malik, which is quite interesting because Imam Malik did not necessarily, at least, well, there were 3 differences of opinions for an Imam Malik. One is that every single animal that basically is a carnivore is haram to consume. Another opinion is that it is not. A third opinion is that it is haram to consume, not haram to consume, makruh to consume. Okay, let's see. For Imam Malik, eating hyenas is haram. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ had forbid eating from anything that had a canine tooth and from a sibah. What is a sibah? Sibah is an animal that feeds on other animals. Basically, we're talking about those predators. Let's see. And of course, he said, and there was no particularization from one type of a predator or a wild animal and another. And he said, and let's look at this one. And in the hadith, وليس حديث الضبع الذي خرجه النسائي في إباحة أكلها مما يعارض به حديث النهي. Okay, so he said the hadith that al-Nasa'i, that there is a hadith in Sunan Nasa'i that basically had said that it was permissible to eat. Let's see, what did he say? He said, well, of course, al-Mujtaba is for al-Nasa'i. What is that hadith? That hadith was Abdul Rahman ibn Abi Ammar. Am I doing the right thing? Is it number 6? Yes, number 6. Here we go. What is that hadith? سألت جابر بن عبد الله بن عن الضبع. So, what did he do? Abdul Rahman ibn Abi Ammar came to Jabir ibn Abdullah and asked him about hyenas. So, he ordered him to eat it. So, what does that mean? He ordered him to eat it? Does he have to eat it? No. He just told him that it's permissible. So, then he asked, that is, he was doubting. It's like, really? Is it asaydun hu? Would it be considered as something that can be hunted? And he responded, Na'am. What is the evidence? And then he said, did you hear it from the Prophet ﷺ? And then he said, yes, I heard it from the Prophet ﷺ that it's permissible. Okay, so here's the thing. You could see that this hadith right there, okay, right there was mentioned, but here's the objection from al-Qurtubi. This hadith, there's that piece of information, and we could see that was narrated in al-Tirmidhi, narrated by Ibn Majah, so those resources are there, that we can eat hyenas, finally. Not too fast. Let's see. It's not like, the last thing that I would want to eat is a hyena, but whatever. Okay, let's see. But this hadith, he said the only one to narrate such a narration or such information is actually Abdul Rahman Abi Ammar. And he said, and this was not something that the scholars had taken as something that they would consider it as credible. And this narrator is not going to be taken as a credible resource if someone that is more credible saying opposite to what he is saying. So what is that? There we go. Now Abu Umar ibn Abdul Bar. Now Abu Umar wants to respond to those that had said that eating hyenas was permissible. And here's what he says. He says, and it was mentioned in the different evidences, basically, قد روي النهي عن أكل ذي ناب من السباع من طرق متواترة. I want you to look at this one. This is, if you focus on this one, you're doing great. What did he say? Said, and it was mentioned the prohibition of eating anything that is a carnivore animal from the wild animals from various resources that basically are mutawatir. What is al-mutawatir? Al-mutawatir is ما رواه جمع عن جمع عن جمع يستحيل تواطؤهم عن الكذب عادة. Okay? What is mutawatir? So mutawatir would be if I were to have a group of Sahaba narrating the same type of ahadith. You got Abdullah ibn Abbas, you got Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, you got Abdullah ibn Umar, you got perhaps maybe Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, you have all these number of Sahaba narrating the same hadith. They're sharing the same story and telling us the same quotations. And then they passed it on to another group of people. And these group of people, they each basically kept this information, passed it on to another group of people. And then they basically passed on this information. There's no way that all these people that narrated and were, something similar to same witness on a same event, basically somehow agree on making up the same lie. So he said, and a group of جماعة من الأئمة الثقات الأثبات ومحال أن يعارضوا بمثل حديث ابن أبي عمار. Said it's impossible. We have a large number of scholars who we would consider as credible and even legitimate, and even, they're thabt. In other words, we know that they're very credible, authentic, genuine, great qualification in passing on the information. And therefore, it is impossible that all of these people, we're going to leave their statement in telling us that we're not supposed to be eating carnivore for a hadith that was narrated by Ibn Abi Ammar. Okay, what is the lesson to learn here? The lesson to learn is just because a hadith might be narrated in Tirmidhi, or might be narrated in Ibn Majah, or might be narrated in Nasa'i, or just have a hadith number, that doesn't make it authentic. That's why we need fuqaha. The fuqaha are going to scrutinize this piece of information, and then the other pieces of information, and see their authenticity, and then say, okay, wait a minute, it's either that when you look at contradictory pieces of information, it's either that one of them is lying, two, one of them is going to cancel the other one out, basically either perhaps one of them came earlier than the other, in other words, something was abrogated, or there's no way that both can be right if they're giving me conflicting statements. There's no way. It's either halal or haram. It's not going to be halal haram. There's no way. So in situations where I may have a text, let's just do it this way. I may have a text. The first thing that I'm going to look into, two texts. Let's say we have two texts, just like this hadith. I've got a hadith that says right there, it is in Nasa'i, that it is permissible to eat basically hyenas or different carnivore animals. Then I also have numerous ahadith that basically tell me that eating from the animals that have canine teeth or carnivore animals is not permissible. Now, I need to do step number one, which is see which one is authentic and which one is not. Are we capable of canceling and figuring out which one is not authentic? Yes, if you had done that, problem solved. What if we basically have these two statements and both are authentic? Conflicting, contradictory to one another, 100%. So what do I do then? Am I able to figure out the dating of this statement and that statement in order to see which one is the final statement? No. If yes, problem solved. The one with the final statement is going to be, the one that is later is basically going to be abrogating the one that basically came prior. Problem solved. But what if no? Both statements contradicting one another. We don't have any information to which one was revealed before and which one's after. We can't weigh. Then in that situation, we would do al-jam'a. We won't cancel out any statement. We'll see then how to put an explanation to both of these statements and actually do al-jama. Are there specific restrictions? Are there specific pieces of information to why this happened? How do we understand it? How do we put these circumstances to explain? Then I would look into other statements to explain to me what was the circumstance in this one compared to the circumstance in that one. I'll then, or sometimes use legal maxims to explain how we understand and how we put these two statements together and understand it. Now, this is extremely important to understand. Now they needed to just use one method, which is scrutinize the authenticity of this hadith to make sure that they're not necessarily canceling it out just because, hey, I just don't feel like eating hyenas, or I think it's disgusting, or I hate the sound that they make, or whatever it is. Absolutely not. Let's see. Abu Umar, who's that? That's Ibn Abd al-Barr, Hafid al-Maghrib. He said, all the scholars had unanimously agreed that it is impermissible to eat monkeys. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ had forbid eating it, selling it, and even said there's no use in it. And he said, and I do not know, that is who? Abu Umar. I do not know anybody that had permitted eating monkeys except what was narrated upon Abd al-Razzaq, an Ma'mar, an Ayub, that Mujahid. Who's Mujahid? Is he, somebody in Gaza? No. Mujahid, this Mujahid is basically one of the tabi'een, one of the great scholars, Mujahid. He was an ex-slave, and then Mujahid basically later, of course, min al-mawali, and was one of the key Sahaba to basically pass on information. What did he say? He was asked about eating monkeys, and then he said, it's not part of Bahimat al-An'am. It's not part of Bahimat al-An'am. So when you say it's not part of Bahimat al-An'am, that makes it that it's a sign. Is it? Yes. And it's not part of al-An'am, meaning not part of what we would consume. Let's say right there. Or actually, it's not a side. So then he said, I had in response to this, ذكر ابن المنذر أنه قال روينا عن عطاء أنه سئل عن القرد يقتل في الحرم فقال يحكم به ذوى عدل منكم قال فعلى مذهب عطاء يجوز أكل لحمه لأن الجزاء لا يجب على من قتل غير الصيد. Ibn al-Mundhir, Shafi'i. Okay, what did he say? He said we had a narration that Ata, who's Ata ibn Abi Rabah, was asked about the monkeys. Is it permissible to kill them in the Haram campus, in the Haram field, basically, on Haram grounds, on Mecca grounds? And he said, in other words, the inference is, if that does happen, then in that situation, somebody that is an expert from you would basically determine the cost, the type of animals or the cost at least, that would be equivalent to killing this monkey. If that person was muhrim. What is muhrim? Basically wearing the ihram and engaging in the rituals of al-ihram, starting from al-miqat, basically to do hajj or umrah. All right, so he said, and therefore, based on Ata ibn Abi Rabah's madhab, it is permissible to eat it, since the person is not going to be considered as they had that if a person would Sorry. All right. So based on that, let me just reiterate. Sorry, kind of dozed out for a bit. Okay. So based on madhab ata, it is permissible to eat it because there's no sin in killing it during ihram. And considered, well, since you're capable of killing it, then therefore the inference is he considered it part of a ni'am. Because can you eat goat meat? Can you eat goat biryani, goat or mutton biryani? Yes, you can. But I'm in a state of ihram. What you're not permitted to do is hunting. What you're not permitted to do is hunting. But you can eat domestic animals, but not hunt. Okay, let's continue. And in Bahr al-Madhab, للروياني or للروياني, let me just explain one thing. Bahr al-Madhab is one of those books for Madhab Shafi'i. Who's al-Ruwayani, and where does his name come from? I don't even know how to say his name right, to be honest, because he comes from a city that I had never heard of. And what is that city? Ruway, maybe? Ruwayan. And where is that? It's basically in an area called Tabaristan, in an area in Iran. What is his name? Abu al-Muhassan Abd al-Wahid ibn Ismail al-Tabari al-Shafi'i. So Tabari, like that Tabari, that famous Mufassir? No. Tabari, that's not his name. Tabari, that's not his name. Tabari actually means he comes from the city Tabaristan. Just like al-Bukhari. Bukhari, that's not his name. His name is Muhammad ibn Ismail. His name is not al-Bukhari. Al-Bukhari means the one that came from Bukhara, which basically is in Uzbekistan. Okay? Just like if you were to say the American sister or the Palestinian or the Lebanese or whatever it is, that's not her name. Her name is not the Lebanese. Okay? Her name is Umayyah. Her name is Wafa. That's her name. But she later became known as al-Libnani or al-Bukhari or al-Bukhari or whatever it is. Okay? So when you say Tabari, that's not his name. That's the city that he basically belongs to. All right. So what about him? Bara'a fil fiqh. He was an excellent scholar in fiqh, and he used to say, even if all the books of Shafi'i were to be burnt down, I لأمليتها من حفظي. What is لأمليتها? Al-imla is to repeat and to basically read it by memory. لأمليتها من حفظي. In other words, by memory, I would have been capable of remembering and repeating everything just from my own memory and what is actually said in there. Okay? And of course, al-malahida. Al-malahida doesn't mean atheists. No, it just means basically like heretics, think of it. So he died 501 Hijri. Okay, what about him? What did he say? He said, upon and according to al-madhab al-Shafi'i, he said it is permissible to sell monkeys because it can be taught. Watch a look at this one. لأنه يعلم. What is يعلم? يعلم means it can be taught, it can be trained. وينتفع به لحفظ المتاع. And it would be beneficial to use that donkey to preserve your items. And he said, and al-kashfu li an ibn Shurayh, that he had said it is permissible to sell it, to make use of it. And he was told, what about making use? Just making use of it and dealing with that. He said, تفرح به الصبيان. He said the children will actually get entertained by it. So what are we doing now? So are we considering that things like toys, for example, are permissible to get because children will get entertained with it? Absolutely. Okay, let's see. Abu Umar, and look at this one. Now he continues, quoting from Abu Umar. And of course, what book is that? That's going to be called At-Tamheed. And At-Tamheed, basically means like kind of like an introduction. An introduction to what? An introduction to the book of Imam Malik. Tamheed is almost in, I don't know, 20 volumes. It's a big book. Okay, let's see what he says. He says, والكلب والفيل وذو الناب كله عندي مثل القرد. He said, and donkeys, elephants, and all carnivore animals are all like monkeys. Wait a minute. So is a monkey carnivore? No, he's an omnivore. So he eats plants and also eats protein and basically flesh. Okay, let's see. So what's your evidence? And he said, وَالْحُجَّةُ قَوْلُ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم لا في قول غيره. Enough said. He said, and what's really the evidence? In other words, the center for evidence to prove whether something is acceptable to eat or not, he said, we would go back to the Prophet ﷺ's words and no one else. What does that mean? That's very similar to what was said about Abu when he was when Imam Malik, he said, كل يؤخذ بقوله ويرد إلا صاحب هذا القبر. You can take the words of anybody and it would be rejected except the one that resides in this grave, infering to Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let's see. And he said, and some people had claimed that there were no Arab that ate dog flesh except some people from the tribe of Faqas. Or actually, was it a tribe? It was actually a sub-tribe because Faqas belonged to the tribe of Asad. Who's the tribe of Asad? Well, the tribe of Asad, they used to live in the northern part of the Saudi Arabia or the Arabian Peninsula, near an area basically called what is that area called? Oh, la ilaha illallah. So northern part. I was supposed to give a lecture there. Hold on, and then I canceled it. Hold on. Qasim. Qasim. All right, that's near the area of Al-Qasim. So Faqas was a sub-tribe, was part of a bigger tribe called Bani Asad. Bani Asad is the same tribe that Sayyidah Khadija comes from. That doesn't mean Sayyidah Khadija used to eat dogs, but this was basically another sub-tribe for the tribe that Sayyidah Aisha was from. And it was said that they used to eat dogs, but no other report basically said that, and then that's why he said za'amanis. Some people claim that. We don't have any evidence to prove that. Okay, now we go for, oh dear, it's actually beyond the time. Okay, tomorrow, oh, not tomorrow, oh dear. Well, that was, because we gotta, oh dear. La ilaha illallah. I was really wanting to go all the way past even all these points. That's okay. No, it's okay. Subhanak Allahumma bihamdik. Sorry, but I gotta go and get some things ready for Salat al-Jumu'ah. Inshallah, we'll see you all later. Inshallah, subhanak Allahumma bihamdik. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. If there are any questions before I sign off, inshallah, I'd be happy to take them. Go ahead, Ustaz Umayy.
Yeah, Bismillah. And when you talk about the monkey, if it's permissible, not permissible, is it it's al-hikmah or it's al-illa of okay to eat it or not?
Al-illa.
What is the illa here? Yes.
Okay. Al-illa is that it is part of the animals that basically, are they part of a side or are they not part of a side? They do eat carnivores too. Sorry, they are part of the animals that eat meat, so they do have a canine tooth.
The monkey can eat meat?
Yes, they can. They're omnivores.
So this is the illa.
Al-illa is that they have a canine tooth. Now, al-hikmah would be, well, let's see, if we look into their flesh, how would it harm our body? What harm would it do? And that would be الحكمة.
And الحكمة غير منضبطة, so maybe more than one
الحكمة غير
reason.
منضبطة. العلة is منضبطة.
And العلة of not eating the monkey is
it's a carnivore animal, or at least an omnivore, which includes that they would be also eating animals as well.
And it's not supposed to be العلة related to a text or ayah or hadith.
So in general, we all agree that the main reason behind legislature, is that this is basically in regards and in reference to the ayat and to the hadith. There's no question about that.
Yes.
Okay. No question about that. Okay. But when we go farther in trying to, at least in this situation, do I understand that there is the illah is that this hadith basically tells me carnivore animals are haram to consume, and that would basically be giving me the information that because it's a carnivore, then therefore it's haram.
What's carnivore, please?
Carnivore أكلة اللحوم.
أكلة
اللحوم اللي هي اللي عندها ناب. الحيوانات اللي عندها ناب، الأنياب.
القرد هذا ناب.
القرد عنده، لأنه هو هو أمنيفور. هو الأمنيفور اللي هم اللي بياكلوا اللحوم وبياكلوا النباتات.
أوكي.
الأربيفورز الحيوانات اللي بتاكل النباتات فقط، زي الأرانب، زي البقر، ما عندهاش ناب. الكارنيفور اللي هم الحيوانات اللي بتاكل الكارني اللي هي اللحمة بالإسبانيولي. كارنيفور، لا؟ كارنيفور اللي هي الحيوانات أكلة اللحوم. زي الأسد، زي النمر، زي الضبع. كل هدول كارنيفورز عندهم. طبعا أكلة اللحوم. طبعا العصافير نفس الشيء. العصافير بتكون برضو عندها مخالب من أجل اللي هو الانقضاض على الفريسة وأكل الفريسة. العصافير مش الطيور الجارحة. الطيور الجارحة، أنا أتكلم عن الطيور الجارحة مش العصافير. أيوة، الطيور الجارحة هي من فصيلة العصافير. فهي الطيور الجارحة. فالطيور ذاتها الجارحة منها هنا السؤال: هل هي محرمة أو غير محرمة؟ لأن هي عمليا هل عندها كاناين توث؟ ما عندهاش كاناين توث، ما عندهاش الناب، ما عندهاش أنياب. عصفور طير ما عندهش ناب، لكن عنده المنقار الملوي. المنقار الملوي حتى يستطيع طبعا تماما زي الناب، لكنه منقار ملوي حتى يعينه على الانقضاض على الفريسة، حتى يخرمها. حتى يخرمها وينقض على الفريسة. لكن عنده المخالب في أيديه حتى يستطيع إنه ينقض على الفريسة ويقطعها حتى يأكلها.
Okay, inshallah on Sunday I can ask more questions, but today you have to go to Salat al-Jumu'ah. I don't want to make it late, inshallah.
Inshallah. So, inshallah, we're going to be continuing. I'm going to put right there kind of like a marker just so that we would remember where we left off at. Let's see. So today is 11 and 7. Okay. Let's do it that way so that we would remember right there. What are we going to talk about next time? We're going to talk about al-Jallala. What is al-Jallala? Basically, the animals that are fed, not necessarily what they're supposed to be eating. In other words, they're fed filth, just always different things. So we're going to talk about that one. And is this like the illah, since Ustaza Umayyah, she loves, getting into the illah. Is this necessarily as to be clean, or is this necessarily that no, because the Prophet ﷺ basically said al-Jallala is not permissible, therefore you cannot eat it. So what do we understand with all of this? Or is there a way to purify that meat of al-Jallala? Is there a way? So let's say you had bought this goat And that was this goat that was supposed to be feeding on good stuff in order to basically be the right goat for your udhiyah, for Eid.
Yeah.
But then this goat managed to run away. Who knows who untied this rope and managed to run away. It ran away out in the city. I looked for it, and it wasn't until later some people came to me and said, you know what, your goat, we saw it the other day. It was actually feeding on garbage. Here goes my udhiyah. Oh no, what am I going to do? So that's the question. Is there a way to purify it? Perhaps maybe make sure that we get it, I guess, purified. And are we going to do that? Or should we just wash the meat thoroughly and it's okay, you know, it ate that filth, not you. Should we just wash it thoroughly, or should we no, just consider that, nope, that's it. There's no way, you can't eat that, and that's too late, and your udhiyah is gone. Okay,
Yeah.
let's see.
And
What
they
about
maybe, maybe this goat, she obliged to eat this from the garbage because after they stop her EBT card.
there you go. You never know. Exactly. You never know. Exactly. See what happens. You don't end up homeless. All right. So also, what about eating horses? I know some countries they actually eat horses. I never tried horse meat.
Horses or
The meat that I tried is only deer meat. Man, that was so good. Rabbit meat, mutton, or of course goats and sheep, birds. Well, we're talking about pigeons. We're talking about chickens, of course. Fish. What else? I'm trying to think of all those. Rabbits. Those are the only things that, in my country at least. Ibil, or camel meat. It was actually brought to me, but I could not whatsoever get to eat it. I mean, it's not haram, but I couldn't get to eat it. I don't know. It just
Sorry, I just have a quick question there.
Go ahead, dear.
Yeah. So what category would we classify snakes under? Because I saw
We did
recently some
actually
people
talk
actually.
about snakes. We did talk about
Oh,
snakes.
I think I missed
Yeah,
that.
we did talk about snakes, and we're still not done, by the way. But in
Oh,
general,
okay.
said that, yeah, we said that Malikis regarded that you can eat snakes if you actually slaughter it, ironically. And we said majority of the scholars considered it as a carnivore animal, and therefore you cannot eat it. So I don't know what you wanted to use snakes for and what meal you wanted to use them for. So definitely, I would avoid it because it's within majority of the scholars, they considered it as a carnivore animal and not permissible. But I'm just letting you know the Malikis permitted it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
It's creepy though. Why cannot?
I mean, you asked the question. I'm not telling you to get.
Yeah, I watched this documentary recently, and they were literally preparing snake meat, and I was so repulsed.
I know. Snake meat, frog meat, and all these different. Alhamdulillah that I don't know. This isn't something that we're exposed to. I guess the maybe the most thing that, at least in Palestine, we always question eating horses. We always thought that it was haram. But look, there's some debate here. Mules. What is a mule? So a mule is basically a combination of horse and donkey. Hey, what about الجمهور على جواز أكل الأرنب? But then you had Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As consider it as haram right there. Okay, now we got some things to discuss right there, talking about rabbits. I know Egyptians love rabbits and eating rabbits. Exactly. So yes, I did used to eat rabbits when I was a little girl, but then it wasn't bad actually. But I'm not necessarily a meat eater. I'm more of a vegetarian than anything else. I'm not a meat eater at all unless it's steak. Okay, unless it's steak, it must be done as a barbecue or a steak, a barbecue only, that's it, but not any other way. Or if you're putting it in like severe fire that completely eliminates any of those juices of it, and that's the only way that I'll probably eat it. But everybody has their own preference. Some people, they know they like, you know, their steak still filled with that, all that blood in it. We're going to talk about that. So inshallah, subhanakallah wa bihamdik, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. We'll see you all inshallah tomorrow with fiqh of marriage. Stay tuned, got a lot to discuss inshallah. I think we were in fiqh of marriage, we were doing the types of marriage contracts.